So this is part 2 of my journey to try out alternative pickups in the bridge position of my Silver Sky. To recap part 1, I'm trying to find a single coil pickup that will have a smoother tone on the top end while tightening up the clarity of the lower strings. Again, I'm trying to keep it in a vintage single coil kind of realm, not looking to stick a high output humbucker in there. In the first video, I put in the Dimarzio HS-2 wired to a single coil mode in the bridge position. I put a link to that video up in the corner if you want to check that out. This time I want to try out the alternative wiring options for the HS-2, series and parallel. Let's take a look at the specifics for how that wiring works. The HS-2 has 4 wires, red, black, white, and green. There's also a bare wire for grounding that I'm not showing here. The pickup is a stacked 2-coil pickup. The red and black wires are the hot and ground wires respectively for the top coil. The white and green wires are the hot and ground for the bottom coil. When I wired for single coil mode, I just connected the red and black wires for the top coil and left the white and green wires alone so the bottom coil was not in use. Now we're going to use those wires to add in that second coil in parallel and series. On the left you see the wiring diagram for parallel. As you can see, we wire the red and white wires, which are hot, to the selector switch, and the black and green wires go to the volume pot as the ground. This puts the output for both coils in parallel, much like you get from selecting 2 pickups using a selector switch. On the right is the wiring for series. Here the white wire connects to the black wire while the red goes to the selector switch and the hot and green goes to the ground. Basically what's happening is that the output from the bottom coil is routing through the top coil, so that the pickups are in series, in other words, one after the other. This is typically how a standard humbucker pickup is wired. Now let's listen to the 2 different wirings and see what we find. So, final thoughts. For the parallel wiring, it really does have that tone you get from a 2 pickup selection. Not so much like on a Strat in-between sound, more like for a Tele middle position. I was surprised at the output though. I expected a higher output, but the tone almost seemed like a lower output than when wired for just the top coil. For the series wiring, we did get that fuller humbucker type tone with more output than I was expecting. It still had a vintage feel to it, but you could tell it wasn't a pure single coil anymore. One thing I didn't like about this configuration, I found I had to be careful on how I picked on the upper strings, otherwise I'd get some really bad overtones. Overall, I wasn't thrilled with either configuration. If I was to keep the HS-2 in the Silver Sky, I'd definitely stick with the single coil mode. But luckily, I have at least one more pickup that I want to try which I hope fits what I'm looking for. We'll get that installed and try it out in part 3.